Welcome to the Writer Reads Chronicles of a Dark God, Book 1, Dark God Emergent, Chapter 34, Wildejun's Edge. Mirale's temple burns and her priests are driven from the land. The ceremonies must be held soon. Staravan's voice woke High Priest Jazrian Ardor from his slumber. My lord, Wildejun's high priest cried, sitting abruptly upright. Staravan continued, not waiting for his servant to ask any more questions. Oceanus has sped the tides, and Grizzelaire given permission to the rivers. The waters begin to mix at dusk tomorrow night. The ceremony must begin at dusk the night after, and no later. My lord? Darkness comes, a new power rises, and the land of Toromar will soon be within its grasp. You will abandon this place at the Meld's End. Mirale's temple in Deverath still burns, and they will soon take mine. How can this be? Now is not the time for questions. Those we helped flee from the Old One's temple in Deverath are arriving. They have been chosen to fight the darkness. They are the ones who will discover where our foe resides. The gods don't know, Jazrian cut in, but Staravan continued as though he hadn't been interrupted. He was imprisoned in a time long before our own, in an era when the elements ruled all and gave all. The elemental gods withdrew an age ago to give us room to grow. They were no longer required, and their influence grew weaker as the races of Entalamorn turned to other forms of worship. But, Jazrian began, but Staravan wasn't finished. They were gracious in their departure, and their children remain, but their knowledge does not. Our chosen will be carried by creatures of earth, and you must go and meet them. Jazrian waited as his god fell momentarily silent. He didn't notice when his wife opened her eyes to watch him struggle to remain calm in the face of his god's news. She said nothing as he sat there, listening as Staravan included her in his next address. Where am I? Go to Marlin's Wood, east of Wildejun's walls. Take the secret ways and take care not to be seen from the walls. The elementals wait you there. I have a map that will take them to a master of their kind. He is waiting with shelter in the Kriakol forest. The map will show them where. Go now. As abruptly as he'd come, Staravan, Lord of Gods, was gone, and Jazrian's wife stirred beside him, reaching for her dressing gown and lighting the candle that stood beside the bed. The light revealed a hand-sized piece of stone sitting on the end of the bed. Jazrian turned to her. I must go, he began, stopping when she smiled. I know, she told him, and you must hurry. I will gather the priests for prayer, and I will send runners to gather those the gods have called for the exchange. Go now. The Lord said you should hurry. Jazrian nodded, taking the robes she'd gathered while she'd been talking and searching for the sturdy sandals he kept beneath his bed whenever he slept. It wasn't the first time Staravan had called him to service in the middle of the night. There was just time for him to kiss his wife farewell before he hurried through the passage behind the bookshelf standing against one wall of their bedchamber. His wife had already left to rouse the priest as he slid the shelves closed and started down the narrow stairs leading beneath the temple. Jazrian didn't know who had built the tunnels that ran from the temple of Staravan and beneath Wildejun's walls. He only thanked them and paid the tunnel's residents for safe passage whenever the need arose. In the early days he had paid for their guidance also, but he had no need of that now. He met the elementals in a thicket outside Wildejun's walls. The creatures of earth and stone were the first of their kind he'd ever seen, and while he viewed them with a sense of awe, their riders caused him some dismay. There were 8 in all, and he watched them dismount with barely concealed impatience. These, my lord? He asked, taking in the 8 who dismounted and thanking the creatures who carried them. His eyes widened when he saw that one had skin mottled in hues of brown and green. Kavarag, my lord, are you sure? He is my chosen. He is my chosen, Staravan told him firmly. The world's hopes rest on him. My lord, Jazrian caught the protest, and he bowed to the god's will. If Staravan said this was their world's hope, then he would do all he could to serve the Lord's need. All he had to do was trust, no matter how difficult that was. He looked up to see the Kavarag regarding him with wary unease, and then noticed the tension running through the big man shifting to stand slightly in front of the elf. A Northman, he thought, his nostrils flaring as though he could sense the beast beneath the man's skin. Puzzlement followed when he could not. And very far from home. Now, why would he pledge his loyalty to a beast elf? He stepped forward, taking in the women. Mages, he corrected himself, then corrected himself again. One mage and her apprentices. The two half-elves, or the mixed-blood elfling and the half-elf, finished off the group, all observing him carefully, even as their hands hovered over their weapons. He almost jumped when the Kavarag slapped the Northman on the shoulder and stepped around him. I am Raema Philemeth, he stated, looking the priest up and down. He gestured to those accompanying him. And these are my companions. The gods ordered us here. This last was said with such bitterness that Jazrian drew a sharp breath, noticing the elf's resentment. He glanced at the Kavarag's face, finding it hard to accept that such a creature had been selected by the gods to face the evil rising in the land. He found it harder still when he remembered the tales brought by travellers from the south. Ingrained prejudice and fear made him wince, despite his decision to trust Staravan's judgment, and he flinched from the beast elf's gaze. With a blush of shame, the priest realized he was clutching his holy symbol and trying to keep the revulsion from his face. But the Kavarag waited. And if he was offended by Jazrian's reaction, he didn't show it. Instead, he waited, and as Jazrian battled with his unexpected surge of emotion, Staravan reminded him of the stone he had tucked into his travel pouch. He fumbled with the latch on his satchel, forcing himself to nod at the beast elf. Forgive me, he said, but I have a message for your allies, the elf told him firmly. The elementals are our allies, as you should know if Staravan has briefed you. Not sure what to say to that, but pressed by his god, Jazrian withdrew the stone and held it out to the largest of the elementals. There is a master of your kind 3 miles hence, he told it as it stooped to examine the stone. Staravan bid me tell you that you will find sanctuary beneath his roof. The elemental bobbed its head, then gently swept the stone from his hand with a remarkably dry tongue, and ate it. With a rumble of gratitude, the creature inclined its head once more, then turned and subsided into the ground. Jazrian watched them go, then turned to face those they'd left behind, and this time he could not hide the flinch of discomfort when he looked at Raoma. The discomfort turned to horror when he registered the same blotched skin on the smallest child in the group. She was, he noted, doubly cursed, having the blood of another feared elven race, if her pale grey eyes and dirt-dulled white hair were anything to go by, and triply cursed if any of that race caught her. They did not tolerate half-breeds. Still, now was not the time for speculation. There were urgent matters afoot. Looking at his gathered guests, Jazrian shrugged with what to say next, but when his guest said nothing to break the silence, he sensed Staravan's presence and found the words he needed. The gods bid you welcome, he managed, turning to lead them back through the tunnels. If you would follow me, I'll guide you to a place of sanctuary where you might refresh yourselves. Thank you. We. The Kavarag fumbled for his own words and found nothing more. With a wry twist of his lips, he shrugged. Thank you, he said again, bowing his head so a lock of blue hair fell forward to hide his face. The sight of it caught Jazrian's attention, and he froze. In his mind, Staravan's gentle amusement came close to laughter. My daughter is not pleased, the god admitted. Please, treat her most favoured servant kindly. She did not give him up willingly, and he did not seek to leave her service. Well, that explains the anger, Jazrian thought, feeling a sudden flash of sympathy for the elf. If it were me, be thankful it is not, Staravan ordered, anger colouring his tones. Jazrian sensed the god pause and waited. Be kind, he repeated, but tell him there are no answers until the ceremonies of exchange have begun. This way, he repeated, taking them back the way he had come. When he turned to lead them on, he saw the questions forming on the Kavarag's lips and sadly shook his head. I'm sorry, he told the elf, but there are no answers for you yet. Much will be shown you once you have all gathered and the ceremonies of exchange begun. You'll have to wait until then. It was not the answer the elf had been hoping for, and Jazrian saw his lips tighten as anger flashed across his features. He caught an anxious look from the Northman, but the Kavarag smoothed his expression to a perfect blank and nodded. So be it. 2 nights hence, Jazrian added in an attempt to comfort him. At dusk, you shall have your answers then. Dawn was 3 hours behind them, and the week before the meld almost over. With the gods moving up the schedule, 2 nights more than half the time the Kavarag would have had to wait, and Jazrian couldn't help feeling relieved and anxious because of it. Relieved because the wait would soon be over, and the reason for the exchange and his goddess's apparent rejection would be revealed. And anxious because only the direst of events could have forced the gods to speed the course of nature to meet their needs. After another sunrise, they would be able to move their followers as they willed. He increased his pace, beckoning them to keep up as he glanced once more in Reomar's direction. We must be swift if you are to be safely hidden. I'll take you by the secret paths. He paused. There are some who would not understand or accept the choosing of the gods. They glanced at their Kavarag companion, their faces showing chagrin, anger on his behalf, and concern. Jazrian ducked his head before softly admitting, even I, with the word of my gods sounding in my ear, find it difficult to comprehend. He started when the Northman's hand descended on his shoulder, but when he looked at the man he saw only understanding, and when the man indicated the passage ahead he nodded and led them forward. The sanctuary of Staravan's temple awaited. There they would find rest before the gods exchanged their priests, and the next stage of their journey began.